Thank you so much, Liz, for that suggestion. I have not listened to that song in a very long time. So back in the studio with Liz Pidgeon, who is an Australian librarian and local history specialist known for her work in genealogy, family history research and community archives. And I met Liz late last year, actually, and she was just so generous in her knowledge and connections and helping me along. I've just launched the Celtic Way tours to Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and I also have founded the Irish Family Heritage Trust, which is a network of genealogists in Ireland that we can connect people to help with family research, or even design a little experience over in Ireland where they can personally guide them to the headstones, the place that the relative used to live, even find relatives in Ireland, which happens very often in a place like Ireland, which that sort of opportunity is really priceless, and it's an absolute privilege to be part of that journey. So I connected with Liz Pidgeon for that purpose because how did we originally
I
connect?
think you'd been to the Ivanhoe Genies group.
That's right.
And Joan there.
That's right. So
put
Joan,
you onto me.
That's it. Joan at the Ivanhoe Genies group put me onto Liz. We had a catch up. Liz is extremely busy, so I was lucky to even get that little time slot. And we were just chatting as the music was playing, and I said to Liz, "Do you know that you're the reason why I'm actually doing this Heartlands radio show?" Because Liz suggested I contact Andrea, who runs a show at Inner FM. So I came in and I was interviewed sitting in the same chair that Liz was today. And Andrea said to me in that interview, "Have you ever thought of running your own radio show?" And I said, I don't think I could manage the panel, which is full of buttons for anyone that's seen the radio studio, and buttons that you need to press on and off and put the music on and switch this on, switch that off. And it's quite overwhelming for someone who's never done it before. And Andrea said, no, it's okay. Someone will train you and you'll be fine. And so I thought, I'll give it a crack. So Liz, thank you so much, because I am sitting here today because of your generous connection.
Fantastic. Love that. Thank you so much.
So back to the questions. We've just been asking Liz all about how do people get started with their family history research. The next question I had was, how important are local libraries and archives in preserving community history that might otherwise be lost?
Well, yeah, of course, I think they're very important. They certainly connect our local community to the stories of where they live, and they help to strengthen the community through a shared understanding of the heritage through activities such as walking tours, publications, exhibition programs, and we manage collections that can contain quite unique voices and perspectives that are not easily accessible elsewhere, including places even like state libraries and national libraries. And they're there also for the future use of historians in the future who may want to find them, interpret them, and share those records for others as well.
Awesome. And I remember going to the Ivanhoe Genies group, and it was just amazing to have a little group. A lot of libraries have these groups that come together, and just watching everyone help each other with their folders of information and what websites they've found helpful as well. It's amazing when you can do it together with other people, isn't it? Because everyone reaches a bit of a brick wall where they think, how am I going to find that piece of the puzzle that I need to find the rest of the information? So what are some of the key records or resources in Australia that people often overlook when researching their family tree?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of sort of answers to this one. And this is that I think people do expect it all to be online. And while there is no better time to research your family history in that regard, there are still people who do skip those early steps of sort of talking to their relatives and gathering the records around the house. I think one of the steps that people they may not even be aware of is that it's very important to verify your ancestor line by obtaining those important civil registration certificates. And then I think also it's something you don't necessarily have to sit down and do by yourself. I think collaboration with others is also important, whether it is with your own family members. I've got a friend who researches constantly with her. I think they're second cousins. They look like sisters, but they're like second cousins. And we're actually had a DNA connection in Ireland, actually.
Awesome.
And but we can't work out where our connection is. But they, they get together and they discuss their research, and they discuss their research challenges and help each other with that. And as you say, with the like-minded audience in places like local libraries and other places like U3A groups and neighbourhood centres all have the family history groups as well that you can tap into. So I think the key resources there, back to your question, is probably the civil registration certificates. They are important.
And just curious about your own personal journey with family history. What are the most interesting bits that you've found out when you've delved into yours?
Look,
if you're happy to share.
Yeah, look. When I first started, I was pregnant with my third child, and she's 28 or something now. So I sort of started before the internet, and I had this goal to find my pioneer ancestors to Australia. So my maiden name is Ryan, so you can just imagine how many Liz Ryans were out there. I've got an Irish ancestry. So that was sort of my goal, which I reached, and discovered that I had ancestors in Scotland and English as well. But yeah, I did tap into that early story about I knew someone who found his half-sister. Well, that was actually my father. And I didn't really have a great hand in that. It sort of all was a bit more serendipity at the same time. But it was interesting in that, people did come out of the woodwork and sort of did know about the secret. But my dad was in his mid-70s by the time he found out that he had this half-sister. And learn more about his father, who was a rat of Tobruk in World War II and unfortunately did not come back. So there's all of that sort of, well, if he'd come back, would he have had a relationship? My dad was only 4 years old. So and then there's all that, well, what if he'd known his sister, and when she had her children, we could have grown up with cousins and gone up north to visit them. And but you can't go about the what ifs. It's a bit like, can we turn back time? Yeah, we'd all love to, but sometimes you can't. So that's a little bit about my story.
Thanks
we all
for
have
sharing.
Stories, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that, because I think lots of people want to do their family history but not necessarily ready for what it uncovers.
Absolutely.
And there is a processing to do depending on what information is uncovered, and different members of the family can deal with that differently. And I know that when my my mum's first cousin in Ireland did our family history, they actually uncovered that there was another cousin. So we thought that there's only 24 cousins, but there's actually another cousin. So that was a real journey for everybody to... I thought I was the oldest cousin. I was a bit offended. No. But yeah, it is definitely a journey that is received differently by different people. So it needs to be treated sensitively as well.
Absolutely.
How have you come across any particularly fascinating stories or discoveries through your work with local history collections in terms of the area that we live in?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd mention the fact that a few years ago we had the Anzac Centenary, 2014-2018. And that was a time when there was a great interest from the local community in our local enlistments for World War I. Of course, the world was a smaller place back then. There was less people. But we had lots of individuals do a lot of work researching names on war memorials, accessing service records. And it was a wonderful time to bring these stories to light, but also to have them available for the future. And I must sort of do a shout out. We're so lucky to have organisations such as the National Archives of Australia, State Library Victoria, National Library of Australia, that help to digitise records and to make records available. But I just quickly also wanted to touch on a big project that we did at the library 2024, beginning of 25. I undertook a project to record some oral history interviews of some local residents who were migrants in our area. And we'd recognised that this was a bit of a gap in our collection. And one participant recounted escaping her homeland overnight undercover, and then her boat being invaded by pirates on the high seas.
Wow.
Now, really quite scary stuff. But she could be the person who today is part of your book club, but you had no idea that this was part of her story. So that was our Homeland project, and you can actually listen to all the interviews that we did on our YouTube channel.
And how would you look that up? What's the name that you type into YouTube?
It's Yarra Plenty Regional Libraries YouTube. So if you just find our YouTube and then just scroll down, we've got lots of videos there.
And that was quite a big
down to the
project, wasn't
Homeland
it? You had a
playlist.
professional photographer and filmer.
We did. We had a professional videographer. Yes, so we had expressions of interest, put out EOI to the community. As I say, we wanted some migrants to Australia. We all know a migrant to Australia, so many. And we had 12 participants and we had 11 countries represented. So we were really pleased. So, yeah, they're all online for people to access. So, yeah, I conducted the oral history interviews, and that was certainly a big learning process for me. I'd done a lot of oral histories myself with my family, but it was quite a different sort of kettle of fish interviewing people I wasn't as familiar with their story. And we touched before on about being sensitive to sensitivities in people's experiences. And that certainly did come up. And the story I just mentioned was one of those. You know, she was only 18, 19 when that happened. She's just, literally came home from university one day and her mum and dad had secured this boat for her to escape, and she just had to pack this bag and say goodbye.
Wow, amazing. They're doing a lot of the oral history capturing in Ireland as well at the moment. I've noticed in museums and things like that they're just newly opening. There was one in Clare near Holy Island. They've just opened. It's a multi-million-dollar project, and they captured a lot of oral histories from people around the area, and it's that's an incredible legacy, isn't it, to leave?
Fantastic. And I imagine in Ireland too, it's the language as well.
Yeah, exactly, the language. So I actually forget his name, which is terrible, but I met this amazing man who runs boat trips over to Holy Island, and he was such a character, and they'd recorded him in the museum that people could listen to the different stories he had to tell, and the language, as you mentioned, which if that's not captured in different ways, it can easily get lost. Right. So for people with migrant heritage, like, for example, Irish, Scottish or European backgrounds, what are some of the helpful strategies to trace ancestors across countries?
Yeah, so I think people do need to be mindful to do as much research in Australia first before you sort of jump into the overseas records. If your Australian research, is pretty robust, hopefully it'll uncover the clues that you'll need to do your overseas research, such as your important names, dates and specific places. I think a lot of us with Irish ancestry in particular, it'll just have Tipperary on the certificates, where our ancestor was born. And that in itself can be that stumbling block because we really want to know our townlands and our specific places. So then if we know that information, then we've got sort of good evidence, for want of a better term, to sort of move forward with our overseas research. And I just sort of a little tip I thought I'd mention, if people's family have arrived in the 20th century, the National Archives of Australia is a great free resource to access immigration records. Go and have a look at it. It's easily accessible on the website. Just go to the record search and type in your family name and see what comes up.
That's really handy. Thanks a lot. I know that you've said in the past that you run sort of workshops. That I know the What's Only a Library, and I think they run in September. I think the month of September, that's Family History Month, and different libraries might have different times throughout the year. This is just a question that I just made up out of interest, but if you were giving a lecture to someone who was completely new to family history, what are the sorts of topics you would cover?
Well, a little bit what I've already touched on, talking to the elderly relatives, sitting down and actually recording the interviews as well. Thinking about identifying all those heritage photographs, which we also touched on before. And that's something also you can do with, like, from a 5-year-old. It can be something the whole family can do. And I just wanted to touch on too that, when you're looking at things and talking about family, think about the who, when, where, how and why questions. Who actually were the pioneer ancestors to Australia? When did they come over? From where did they come? How did they come? Did they fly in a plane? Did they come on a boat? And then maybe even why did they come to Australia? So that's sort of those kind of questions. And I know a lot of us, we are only first or second generation Australians. So everyone's story is going to be different in that regard. Yeah.
And in terms of an advanced audience, they've probably been researching for 6 months, 12 months, and they've got a substantial amount of information. What sort of workshop would you give people like that?
Yeah, look, it's all about telling the story and sharing the story, isn't it? So we have a lot of family historians who sort of merged into becoming family historian authors, and writing up their family history. But it's not always about writing your family history. Some people don't feel they have the skill set there. But we certainly do have writing workshops. We have author visits and people who've written memoirs and things like that. So I often will have a speaker who may want to come and talk about the book they write. But I also say, look, that's terrific, but can you also talk about your journey to getting published? What were your stumbling blocks? What were your learnings from, I should have had it all 12-point font instead of, 8-point font. And little tips like that can be really handy. But it's also, other options, websites, a lot about keeping your family history on your desktop computer and not sort of having it all online. You really should have master copies on your computer. And so there's lots of different aspects to that as well. But yeah, really at the end of the day, it's about trying to pull information together and sharing it and writing it up so you've got that record.
It's just been such a fascinating conversation all about family history from a librarian who's spent a large amount of her life helping people to discover their family history. So thank you so much, Liz, for sharing all of that wisdom. And we were just sort of saying in the break just how beautiful it is to have a recorded version of the family history by the person themselves. And Liz reminded me that they've just opened a new podcast studio at the Rosanna Library for people to be able to go in and use that as an incredible facility to invite someone, family member, whoever it is, to actually ask them about their journey. And I can say, about my granny, we actually had an amazing situation where I ran a charity for 17 years and there was a documentary made about the charity called 7 Women in Nepal. And because of that documentary, we had a filmer that wanted to interview my granny. And because of that, now I've got this incredibly beautiful little clip of my grandma talking about her life, which is just so precious to the family. But Liz just reminded me in the break that, that is a great reminder for people to, if you do still have a granny or a family member, podcast studios, I know how much they cost to rent out because I run a podcast myself and they're incredibly expensive for an hour to hire, but the Rosanna Library now has a podcast studio for you to use. So Liz, I'll just ask you to share a little bit about that opportunity for people.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's open yet. We're going to be having orientation sessions for people who are interested in learning how to do it, but I understand that it's fairly straightforward. So it's a dedicated space within the brand new Rosanna Library that's just opened in Turnham Avenue about a month ago. So if you're local to the area and you haven't checked out our new Rosanna Library, I'd love to invite you to go and visit. And there's also meeting spaces that you can book and learning lounges and computers there that people can access as well. So, so just go to our website, www.yprl.vic.gov.au, and you can learn more there.
Awesome. The next question is, how is technology changing genealogy today? Are online databases helping, or can they sometimes create new challenges?
I think there's two aspects to that question, and just talking about the podcasting is a nice a tie-in, actually, isn't it? But I really want to say genealogists have generally always embraced technology. And just thinking off the top of my head, examples include genetic genealogy, that's using DNA to find out a bit more about your ancestry, using AI in family history. We've had genealogists, creating websites and blogs since the dot days of the internet to share research and stories, but to connect with others. You can do a virtual tour via Google of the address you just found on an 1881 census in London from the comfort of your own home, the same with a final resting place in a cemetery. But, the digitisation of records and accessibility of these records online through online databases has opened up a world of information, which 20 years ago was a lot harder to access. Just to name a few, we've got resources like the Internet Archive, Trove, British Newspapers Archive, Family Search, Ancestry, Find My Past, My Heritage, and many, many others that are now major players in the field and contribute to genealogy as being a billion-dollar industry. But these do present advantages and challenges, especially those that have the option for people to create online trees. There are a lot of people who do not necessarily take enough care to evaluate connections and just copy material from other researchers without that evaluation, without acknowledgement or contact with that initial person who may have had that piece of information on their tree. And this can certainly be very frustrating for everyone, especially to those researchers who've done the hard slog over many years, possibly since before the internet to gather their research. So, they present challenges, but where would we be without technology improving our lives?
That's right, and thanks. That's a great little list that you gave of some of the websites that people look at. We just touched on this before, but what role does community memory, stories from older relatives, photos, letters, play alongside official historical records?
Yeah, I think very important. Every story has value, and it helps make history accessible for everybody. Individuals can have a memory or a story or an old letter of an event that has information that cannot be found elsewhere, that cannot be found in the official records. And these can then be clues for further research in the official records or the less official records, such as newspapers. We're lucky we've got lots of historical newspapers digitised, freely accessible online. And everyone loves looking at their heritage photos. It's so rewarding and important to get those identified. We've touched on this. And also asking those questions of your relatives, the who, the when, where, the how and the why of their story. And everyone in the family can get involved too, from children up. But recording these stories and interviews becomes something that is also important. The way that our ancestors speak, some of our oldies may have, an accent, and that's certainly worth preserving, as we've mentioned. So I invite everyone to do that recording of their family history interviews, especially with their older relatives.
Amazing. And final question, and thank you so much, Liz, for your time today. It's just been so helpful and informative for people. It's just your years of experience and your tips in helping people research their family history, so really appreciate your time. But finally, what do you think people gain personally from learning about their family history and the stories of the place they live?
Yeah, look, I think at the core, people want to know where they've come from, and they also want a better understanding and connection to the place where they live. So I love attending and organising programs of interest to the community, where you can't even start the session or pack up the session because members of the audience are still there, heavily engaged with each other, over that common bound interest. So that sense of connection and belonging is important, which, I think our role at the library in particular has a role in the community as far as that goes. So I think that's sort of it. So, I just encourage everyone to check out what the library has and what opportunities it might be. Explore our collections, our digital resources, our programming, and get started.
Unreal. Thanks
today.
Again. Yeah, thanks again. Was there anyone that you wanted to give an extra special shout out to or anything like that before we conclude? There are probably many.
All my colleagues at the library, they're doing a wonderful job. Yeah. Shout out to all the staff at Yarra Plenty Regional Library.
Oh, amazing. Love a bit of encouragement. Thank you so much, Liz Pidgeon, for your time today and that wealth of knowledge that our listeners can benefit from. It's been an absolute delight having you on the show.
Thanks so much, Steph.